I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and we're back at yet another very windy day at the Lang Proving Ground in Victoria to take our first drive in the GWM Tank 500 plug-in hybrid. Now, this vehicle is special largely because of its price. It's $79,990 drive away, actually $77,990 as a bit of an early bird special on this vehicle. So effectively, we're talking base Prado diesel cloth seat money for a Tank 500 Ultra with a plug-in hybrid system, a long electric driving range, 300 kilowatts of power, heaps of spec inside. This is a recipe we've seen before, a lot of car for the money, and I think it's fair to say GWM is directly targeting Toyota. Now we're at Lang because GWM is also tuning suspension and steering for Australia now, but the Tank 500 plug-in hybrid hasn't received that yet. What it has got is on paper an impressive plug-in system with mechanical full drive that promises to be less janky than that Tank 500 hybrid we drove together a month or two ago. Has that panned out? I will tell you in today's video. We'll quickly revisit the interior, but mostly we're here to drive the plug-in hybrid to see what it's really like on the road. And those roads are recreated right here at Lang. So before we get started, hit subscribe. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. For all intents and purposes, the interior of the Tank 500 plug-in hybrid in ultra trim is exactly the same as the Tank 500 that we reviewed together a couple of months ago. That means aesthetically quite a pleasing interior. Even the fake wood grain up here kind of looks textural and interesting to my eye. And what I once accidentally called vinyl seats, I'll happily correct myself and say these are genuine Napa leather seats in the Tank 500 Ultra. They're quilted, they're heated, they're cooled, they've got four-way lumbar, and frankly, they're supportive and comfortable. They don't have much side bolstering, but as we'll see when we drive the car, that kind of fits with the lazy boy sort of dynamics of the Tank 500. Big round steering wheel, paddle shifters for your transmission, because this car is not a CVT, as we'll find. And beyond that, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We have some physical controls for things like low range, your locking diffs, heated and cooled seats, EV mode, which is of course selectable in this plug-in hybrid, and a few climate controls here. But unfortunately, the Tank 500 does not get GWM's new Coffee OS 3 infotainment system. Instead, it's got an older infotainment system, which is not very intuitive or snappy, and has quite a lot of controls buried in menus. And for things like adjusting your temperature, you've got to leave Apple CarPlay, for instance. Newer GWM products like the H6 plug-in hybrid have got a much better system. We'd like to see that come to the Tank 500 in future. But again, we've got to keep reminding ourselves of the price. It's very sharply priced, and for that money, the interior is pretty nice, isn't it? Let's check out row 2. But if the front seat was kind of, nice for the money, the second row in the Tank 500 is frankly excellent, surpassing your Toyota 300 series by some margin. Not just because there's actual legroom, which is a novelty in a Prado or a 300 series, but because of the amount of toys you've got back here. Heated and ventilated seats in row 2, still a rarity. Air vents, of course. You've got a flip down panel with extra USB chargers, integrated sun blinds, soft touch materials here, the works. And that's before you get to your executive control center here with an integrated screen so you can control your multimedia from row 2. In China, a lot of people get driven in the back. In Australia, this is the domain of your spoilt children, but it's very comfortable and very plush. Around the back, you'll find the same side hinged rear door as any Tank 500, and a boot that's just fine, and one that doesn't contain a third row. The battery and the gubbins have got to go somewhere, and that was the victim. The regular Tank 500 hybrid, which is not a plug-in and has a much smaller battery, does have a third row, and quite a well-packaged one too. Around the back, you will also notice the slightly 1990s styling of this vehicle, which I think some people will like. Others will find a touch retro. You got your spare wheel fitted to the back here, so don't reverse into that. And you'll tell the plug-in hybrid because it tells you. It says PHEV High 4T on the back. And you can see this one's covered in mud. That's because GWM has been showing off that mechanical four-wheel drive system today. Has there been a tiny bit of damage from some people going a little bit too hard? It wasn't me, don't blame me. Maybe. But all in all, I think that speaks to the confidence in the vehicle, doesn't it? Running costs for the Tank 500 plug-in hybrid are potentially quite a lot lower than the standard hybrid, but really only if you can charge this vehicle at home.
and even better if you have something like a big solar array to do it. The plug-in hybrid has a 37 kilowatt hour NMC battery pack, but because this full drive is so big and heavy, it's really not efficient on battery power. 36 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers is our WLTP estimate, which gives a driving range of about 102 kilometers. Then, on a dead battery, expect the Tank 500 plug-in to use about 10 liters per 100 kilometers WLTP, which is a little bit better than the hybrid from our testing. Your combined driving range with the EV mode and then your engine on a dead battery is about 800 kilometers. So this is not a super long-range plug-in hybrid, but if you can do your urban driving on battery power charged up relatively inexpensively at home, things do start to add up. Charging can be done on AC power or DC with a peak speed of 50 kilowatts. We don't have service pricing for the plug-in hybrid yet, but we are estimating a 5-year service price of about $3,000. Intervals start at 12 months, 10,000 kilometers, and then 12 months, 15,000 kilometers. The warranty on the vehicle is 7 years, unlimited kilometers, and for the battery, 8 years with unlimited kilometers.
Okay, time to take a drive in the Tank 500 High 4T plug-in hybrid. And I've got it set to hybrid mode at the moment rather than electric mode, but it takes off in EV if it's got sufficient state of charge in the battery. But in this mode, it's going to cycle between the petrol engine and the electric motor, just as you'd expect a hybrid to do. But the big difference between the Tank 500 hybrid that we drove together a month or two ago and this plug-in is that the plug-in has a lot more power, but it's also got a much bigger battery. Beyond just those basic specs that anyone could rattle off though, it's also the case that the plug-in hybrid has quite different calibration of its battery management system. And like a lot of plug-in hybrids, and in particular Chinese plug-in hybrids hitting the market at the moment, the plug-in retains more charge in reserve more of the time. And what that means is that the plug-in hybrid actually solves one of my big problems with the Tank 500 hybrid, which is an issue with performance degradation when you run out of battery. What I mean by that is in the regular Tank 500, which has been on the market for the last couple of years, it's a turbo petrol hybrid with a small battery. And it tends to use that battery to supplement the turbo petrol's 180 kilowatts of power when you're overtaking, merging, accelerating out of a corner on a country road. But it uses its battery power like that. And then you don't have any battery power until it's, charged itself by braking, which can take a bit of time. So you might need to accelerate hard once and you get 255 kilowatts of power, I think, in the hybrid. And then you go to accelerate hard a second time and it has no electric power to help. So it's back to 180 kilowatts. So it's a lot slower. In the plug-in hybrid, that is much less of a problem. We still have pretty much the same 2-liter turbo petrol engine with 180 kilowatts. But we now also have a 120 kilowatt, 400 Newton meter electric motor up there at the front, which is more powerful than the regular Tank 500 hybrid. But because we have a big battery that keeps more electric power in reserve more of the time, we're able to deploy more like 300 kilowatts of power much of the time. And the Tank 500 plug-in is much more rare in the occasions that it degrades the performance, and GWM itself actually says its performance degradation is only ever about 10% when you've got very low state of charge. So that is a nice improvement over the Tank 500 hybrid. And to drive, the plug-in powertrain feels great. Slick, smooth, muscular, torquey, refined, and very quiet. The petrol is not the last word in refinement, but because it's always being supplemented with electric power, it is nice and hushed, and you just don't really hear it. The automatic transmission is very slick, the shifts are imperceptible, which is really what you want in a car like this. So the powertrain gets a thumbs up from me. The ride and handling is interesting though. We're here at the LandCruiser Proving Ground, which is great because we have this country road simulation that is very accurate, as you would expect. This is where Holdens were developed at the end of the day, and they needed proper country road simulations. But the ride and handling of the Tank 500 plug-in has not been retuned by GWM, which is the whole reason we're here at LandCruiser, because they're starting to work their way through the range and customize the shock absorbers and the electric power steering tune for our market. That hasn't happened to the Tank 500 at all yet. It's probably on the agenda, but it hasn't happened yet. The good news is though, the Tank 500's ride and handling is okay, it's acceptable, it's not a deal breaker, and it's certainly not the worst vehicle in the GWM range for ride quality, body control, or handling. It does have old GWM steering feel, which is to say not much steering feel and very slow steering. So it feels a bit like a bus through the steering wheel. You got to add a lot of lock and there's a big dead spot on center. That is exactly the kind of steering stuff that GWM's new engineers here in Australia are fixing. The steering is a lot better in something like a Haval H6 than in this Tank 500, but they'll get there. More importantly though, I think for a car like this, the ride quality is fine in the Tank 500. It is softly sprung, it is cushy, it is comfy, it's a little bouncy. All of that will be improved and could be better, but it frankly suits that laid back kind of 90s 4WD vibe of the Tank 500. And with the plug-in being so muscular and so refined and just a car you really can relax into, this sort of soft ride, it kind of fits the profile, to be honest. So I'm really okay with the way this vehicle drives. In fact, there are parts of it that I quite like. The safety systems are not one of them. We haven't had the new infotainment system upgrade, and it just feels like the software of the car is a generation behind what GWM is doing now. The lane keep is oversensitive, the speed warning needs to be deactivated when you drive the car, there's too much digging through the menus. It appears this is the kind of thing GWM Australia is also interested in getting right for our market and calibrating the ADAS properly. That hasn't happened yet with the Tank 500. I'd love to see that in a future update. So that brings us to the need for a verdict, or at least, I guess, the end of my first impressions, because I do want to actually use this car for my commute and live with it for a week or two before deciding how good it actually is. But frankly, I'm a cynical road tester, and I'm impressed by this vehicle. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing GWM Australia improve the ride and handling of the Tank 500 with their local testing, but frankly, the Tank 500 is not one of the worst cars in the lineup for that stuff anyway. What I am very impressed by is the plug-in hybrid powertrain, which feels smooth, slick, powerful, quiet, and refined, and all for the price of a pretty agricultural-based Prado diesel. Quite impressive, particularly when you consider this vehicle will actually be earning GWM credits under Australia's strict new emissions laws because it's a plug-in hybrid. Now, do we know about the really long-term reliability of this system? No, we don't yet. That will have to prove itself over time, and I get that that's the weak point, but at least on a surface level, as a brand new car, there's a lot to like here. And I think it should be on your test drive list. Keen to know your opinion, so let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.